Marcus Johnson was mopping the gleaming marble floors of Skyline Tower when he heard the baby's desperate cries echo through the lobby, followed by the thunderous voice of Richard Sterling, the building's most notorious tenant, screaming at the infant's terrified mother to shut that thing up or get out. The 16-year-old janitor's son gripped his mop handle tighter, remembering how his own mother had once stood in a lobby just like this one, clutching him close while bitter. Words rained down on them both. What happened next would not only change the lives of everyone in that lobby, but would also expose a 20-year-old secret that would shake the Sterling family empire to its core. What connection could a teenage janitor's son possibly have to one of the city's wealthiest families? And why did Richard Sterling turn pale as a ghost the moment Marcus stepped forward? If you believe in standing up for what's right and want to see more stories of unexpected heroes changing lives, please subscribe to our channel. Help us spread these powerful messages of hope and justice. Sarah Chen hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her 8-month-old daughter, Lily, was teething, running a slight fever, and nothing seemed to soothe her. The pediatrician's office didn't open until 9, and Sarah had already used all her sick days this month at the accounting firm where she worked. With no other choice, she'd bundled Lily up against the morning chill and headed to Skyline Tower, hoping to drop off crucial tax documents before her client's deadline. The lobby's marble floors and soaring ceilings usually impressed her, but today they only amplified Lily's cries. Sarah bounced her daughter gently, whispering soft reassurances as she fumbled with the diaper bag, searching for a pacifier. A security guard, Lisa Martinez, according to her nameplate, offered a sympathetic smile from behind the desk. "Rough morning?" Lisa asked, already reaching for a visitor's pass. Before Sarah could respond, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Richard Sterling emerged, his custom-made Oxford shoes clicking against the polished floor. He was speaking loudly into his Bluetooth earpiece about property acquisitions and profit margins. The moment Lily's cries reached him, he stopped mid-sentence. "What is that noise?" he demanded, yanking the device from his ear. His cold gray eyes locked onto Sarah and Lily. "This is a prestigious business establishment, not a daycare center." Sarah felt her face flush. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. She's not feeling well. We'll just be a minute. Do you have any idea who I am?" Sterling cut her off, advancing toward them. "I own this building. I own half the buildings in this city, and I absolutely cannot tolerate this kind of disruption in my lobby." Lily, sensing her mother's distress, began to cry harder. Sarah's hands trembled as she tried to gather her things. The tax documents slipped from under her arm, scattering across the floor like autumn leaves. "Please," Sarah whispered, tears threatening to spill. "I just need to deliver these to the 15th floor." Sterling's face contorted with disgust. "Security!" he barked, though Lisa was already moving from behind her desk. "Remove this woman and her screaming brat immediately, and send a cleaning crew. Who knows what diseases they're carrying?" The cruelty in his voice made Sarah flinch. She clutched Lily closer, her daughter's tears now soaking into her blouse. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement, someone approaching with a mop, probably coming to clean up after them, just as Sterling had ordered. But then a quiet voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Sterling, I think you need to apologize to this lady and her baby." The lobby fell silent, save for Lily's slowly quieting whimpers. Sarah turned to find a young man, still holding his mop, standing between her and Sterling. He couldn't have been more than 16 or 17, wearing a janitor's uniform with Johnson embroidered on the pocket. Despite his youth, there was something in his stance that made even Sterling take a step back. "What did you say to me, boy?" Sterling's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. The young janitor didn't flinch. "I said you need to apologize. This is your building, sir, but that doesn't give you the right to treat people this way." Sterling's face, normally a mask of corporate confidence, underwent a strange transformation. The color drained from his cheeks as he really looked at the young man for the first time. His eyes widened, then narrowed as if seeing a ghost. Who are you?" Sterling demanded, but his voice had lost its edge. There was something else there now. Fear? "My name is Marcus Johnson. My mother Grace works here too. She raised me to stand up to bullies, no matter how rich or powerful they think they are." At the mention of Grace's name, Sterling grabbed the marble column beside him for support. Lisa, the security guard, was watching the scene unfold with keen interest, her hand hovering over her radio but making no move to intervene. Sarah felt Marcus's gentle touch on her elbow. "Ma'am, let me help you collect your papers, then I'll escort you to the 15th floor myself." He turned back to Sterling, who was still staring at him with that strange mix of recognition and dread. "Unless Mr. Sterling has any objections." Sterling opened his mouth, closed it, then spun on his own heel and practically fled back to the elevator. As the doors closed behind him, Sarah could have sworn she saw him pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered to Marcus as he helped gather her scattered documents. Lily had finally quieted, watching the young man with curious eyes. "No need to thank me," Marcus replied, though his gaze remained fixed on the elevator where Sterling had disappeared. "Something tells me this morning is about to get a lot more interesting." The morning sun streamed through Skyline Tower's glass walls, casting long shadows across the scattered papers as Marcus helped Sarah gather them. Lisa had come over to assist, keeping one eye on the elevator bank where Sterling had made his hasty retreat. "I've worked here 3 years," Lisa said, smoothing out a crumpled tax form, "and I've never seen Mr. Sterling lose his composure like that, not even during the Christmas party incident with the spilled wine on his custom suit." Marcus handed Sarah the last of her documents, carefully arranged in order. As he did, something fluttered from between the pages. A worn leather wallet. "Mr. Sterling must have dropped this when he trailed off, not wanting to finish the sentence in front of Sarah. "When he was being a complete jerk," Sarah supplied, managing a small smile as she bounced Lily, who had finally settled into quiet hiccups. "You can say it. I've dealt with men like him my whole career." Marcus turned the wallet over in his hands. It was expensive, the kind of leather that got softer with age, with Sterling's initials embossed in gold. He should return it immediately. That would be the right thing to do. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the way Sterling had looked at him, or the tremor in his voice when Marcus mentioned his mother's name. The wallet fell open and a photograph slipped out. "I'll take that to Lost and Found," Lisa offered, reaching for the wallet. But Marcus was frozen, staring at the photo that had fallen to the floor. It showed 2 men in their younger years, arms around each other's shoulders, standing in front of this very building when it was still under construction. One was clearly Richard Sterling, though less gray, less severe. The other man could have been his twin, except for his smile, warm and genuine, reaching all the way to his eyes that Marcus saw every morning in the mirror. "Thomas," Lisa whispered, peering over Marcus's shoulder. "That's Thomas Sterling, Richard's brother. He died in an accident about 16 years ago, back when they were still building this place." The elevator chimed again. Marcus looked up to see Richard Sterling striding across the lobby, his face twisted with panic when he spotted the photograph in Marcus's hands. "Give me that!" Sterling lunged for the wallet and photo, but Marcus stepped back, keeping the image out of reach. "That's private property. You're stealing from me, like you stole from Thomas?" The words came out of Marcus's mouth before he could stop them, though he wasn't even sure what they meant. Something inside him, some deep-buried instinct, told him this photograph was important. Sterling's face went through another transformation, from rage to fear to calculation, in the span of seconds. When he spoke again, his voice was eerily calm. "My brother's death was a tragic accident. Ancient history now. Give me the wallet, and we'll forget this morning ever happened. In fact," he pulled out his checkbook, "let me compensate you for your trouble. I don't want your money, Mr. Sterling." Marcus carefully slid the photo back into the wallet. "But I would like to know why you looked at me like you'd seen a ghost, and why you're so desperate to get this picture back." Sarah had backed away slightly, holding Lily close, but her eyes were sharp with interest. Lisa stood her ground, her hand still hovering near her radio. The lobby had grown eerily quiet, the usual morning bustle suspended in the tension between. Marcus and Sterling. "You're just a janitor's son," Sterling said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You don't want to cause trouble. Think about your mother's job." At the mention of his mother, Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. "My mother works harder than anyone in this building. She raised me alone after my father died, or at least, that's what she always told me." He held out the wallet, but didn't let go when Sterling grabbed it. "Thing is, Mr. Sterling, I never believed that story. And looking at this photo, I'm starting to understand why." Sterling yanked the wallet free, nearly stumbling backward in his haste. "You're delusional. Security, escort this young man out of the building. He's fired, effective immediately." "Actually, sir," Lisa stepped forward, her voice steady, "janitorial staff falls under building management, not Sterling Properties. You can't fire them directly, and I've already logged this morning's incidents in my security report, including your behavior toward Ms. Chen and her baby." Sterling's composure cracked again. Without another word, he turned and rushed toward the private elevator to the penthouse offices, leaving behind a wake of whispers and speculation. Marcus watched him go, his mind racing. He'd seen photos of his supposed father, always grainy, always distant, always somehow incomplete in his mother's explanations. But that man in the photograph with Richard Sterling, that man with the kind eyes and genuine smile, Marcus, Sarah touched his arm gently. "Are you okay?" He managed a nod, though his world had shifted on its axis. "I need to talk to my mother." Grace Johnson was cleaning the 32nd floor windows when her son's text arrived. "Mom, we need to talk. It's about Thomas Sterling." Her reflection in the glass showed a woman gone pale, her dark hands trembling against the window squeegee. She'd known this day might come, but she'd prayed it wouldn't be so soon. The service elevator hummed quietly as she descended to the maintenance level where Marcus waited. 16 years of secrets weighed heavily in her chest. 16 years of half-truths told to protect her son and herself from a past that refused to stay buried. She found Marcus sitting on an overturned bucket in the maintenance room, still holding his mop like an anchor. The morning light filtering through the small basement window caught his profile, and Grace's heart clenched. He looked so much like Thomas in that moment, the same determined set to his jaw, the same thoughtful furrow between his brows. "Lisa called up," Grace said softly, closing the door behind her. "Said there was some trouble with Richard Sterling in the lobby. Why didn't you tell me I look exactly like Thomas Sterling?" Marcus's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of accusation. "All these years you said my father was a construction worker who died in an accident? But that wasn't true, was it?" Grace sank onto a stack of cleaning supply boxes. The chemical smell of bleach and floor polish couldn't mask the staleness of old lies. "It's complicated, Marcus." "Then uncomplicate it." He pulled out his phone, showing her a photo he'd taken of the picture from Sterling's wallet. "Because Richard Sterling looked at me today like he was seeing a ghost, and now I know why." Grace stared at the image, Thomas and Richard, young and strong, standing before the skeletal framework of what would become Skyline Tower. Thomas's smile, the one she'd fallen in love with, beamed back at her across the years. "I was a housekeeper for the Sterling family," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thomas was different from his brother. Kind. He saw people. Really saw them. Not just what they could do for him." She twisted her cleaning cloth between her fingers. "We fell in love. It was stupid and reckless, but we were young, and Thomas promised..." "Promised what, Mom?" "That he'd stand up to his family, that we'd be together properly." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "He was going to announce everything at the tower's opening ceremony. He'd already changed his will, set up accounts for us." "But then the accident happened." Marcus leaned forward. "What kind of accident?" "They said he fell, that he was inspecting the upper floors and stepped wrong." Grace's voice hardened. "But Thomas knew every inch of this building. He designed most of it himself. He wouldn't just fall." "Did Richard have something to do with it?" Grace stood abruptly, moving to organize bottles of cleaning solution that were already perfectly aligned. "I don't know. I was 3 months pregnant with you when it happened. Richard, He came to me afterward, said it would be better for everyone if I took a settlement and moved away. But I couldn't leave. This building, it was the last thing Thomas created. I wanted you to be near that, even if you didn't know why. So you took a job as a janitor in the building your child's father helped build, Marcus said slowly. The building his uncle owns? Have you been hiding in plain sight all these years? I've been protecting you, Grace corrected. Richard Sterling is a dangerous man, Marcus. The way he controls everything, destroys anyone who stands in his way. She turned to face her son, her eyes pleading. Promise me you'll let this go. We've made a life for ourselves. It's not perfect, but it's ours. But Marcus was shaking his head, rising from his makeshift seat. Mom, I saw him today. Saw how he treated a mother and her crying baby. Saw how quickly he tried to bully and then buy his way out of the situation. And when that didn't work, he took his mother's hands in his. He was scared, Mom. For the first time in his life, Richard Sterling was scared because he saw Thomas looking back at him through my face. Marcus, please, I'm not letting this go. His voice was gentle but firm. Thomas Sterling was my father, and I need to know what really happened to him, don't you? Grace pulled her hands free and cupped her son's face. Thomas's eyes looked back at her, filled with the same determination she'd fallen in love with all those years ago. I do know, she whispered. I've always known something wasn't right, but knowing and proving are different things. Then let's prove it. Marcus squared his shoulders. For Thomas, for you, for all the people Richard Sterling has hurt. Grace studied her son's face for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. There's something I need to show you. I've kept it all these years, waiting for the right time. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small key. Thomas gave this to me the day before he died. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should look in his private office on the 40th floor. Mom, that floor has been sealed off. For years. Exactly. Grace's eyes held a glimmer of their old fire. Maybe it's time we found out why. The Sterling name adorned half the buildings in the city's skyline, each gleaming tower a testament to the family's power. Richard Sterling's office on Skyline Tower's top floor offered a perfect view of his kingdom, and he stood there now, hands clasped behind his back, watching the morning sun glint off his architectural trophies. The young janitor's face haunted him. Thomas's face, his brother's eyes staring back at him across 16 years of carefully constructed lies. Richard's hand shook as he poured himself a drink. Scotch, aged 30 years, the kind Thomas used to tease him about. Trying to buy class, his younger brother would say with that infuriating smile. Richard, Victoria Sterling's voice cut through his thoughts. His wife stood in the doorway, elegant as always in her tailored suit. The board is waiting, and you haven't answered any of my messages about the scene in the lobby. It's handled, he snapped. But Victoria was already scrolling through her phone. Really? Because social media says otherwise. Videos are already circulating of you yelling at a mother and her baby. The PR team is having fits. She placed her phone on his desk, showing him the trending hashtag #SkylineBully. And there's something else. A photo of a young janitor standing up to you. People are calling him a hero. Richard drained his glass. Fire the PR team. Hire new ones. That's what we pay them for, isn't it? That's not the point. Victoria moved closer, studying her husband's face. 25 years of marriage had taught her to read the subtle signs of his distress. The boy in the video, there's something about him, something familiar. Don't. He looks like Thomas. Richard's glass shattered against the wall. I said don't. Victoria didn't flinch. She'd weathered worse storms than her husband's temper. 16 years, Richard. 16 years of watching you build this empire on your brother's grave. Did you think the truth would stay buried forever? There is no truth, Richard hissed. Only what we make of it. Thomas died in an accident. That's what the reports say. That's what everyone agreed to. Is that what Grace Johnson agreed to? Richard's head snapped up. What do you know about her? I know she's worked in this building since it opened. I know she has a 16-year-old son, and I know you've been paying her salary through a separate account, one that doesn't appear in the company books. Victoria's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I'm the CFO of Sterling Properties, Richard. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? The intercom buzzed. Mr. Sterling, the board is asking about the delay. Richard straightened his tie, his mask of corporate confidence sliding back into place. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. He turned to his wife. We're not discussing this now. No, we're not, Victoria agreed. But someone will start asking questions. That boy, Marcus Johnson, he's already become a social media sensation. People love an underdog story, Richard. A young janitor standing up to a corporate tyrant. It writes itself. Then we'll rewrite it. Richard moved to his desk, pressing a button. Get me everything on Grace Johnson and her son. Everything. Victoria watched her husband with growing unease. She'd spent years building her own walls of denial around Thomas's death, telling herself the official story was true, but seeing Marcus Johnson's face, hearing the whispers already spreading through the building. What really happened that night? She asked quietly. Richard's fingers froze over his keyboard. For a moment, something like grief flickered across his face. My brother was going to destroy everything our family built, all because of some inappropriate relationship with the help. I tried to reason with him, but Thomas always was stubborn. What did you do? What I had to. Richard's voice was ice. What I'll always do to protect the Sterling legacy. He stood, straightening his cuffs. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to attend. And Victoria, remember whose side you're on? She watched him leave, her mind racing. In her purse, her phone buzzed with a new notification. Another video from the lobby was going viral, this one showing the moment Richard saw Marcus's face. The moment all color drained from the great Richard Sterling's face. Victoria Sterling had built her career on numbers, on finding patterns in chaos. And now a pattern was emerging, one that traced back 16 years to a night when her brother-in-law supposedly fell to his death. She opened her laptop, fingers flying over the keys as she accessed old records, construction schedules, security, logs, insurance claims. Thomas had always told her to pay attention to the details. Numbers don't lie, Vic, he'd say, even when people do. The board could wait. She had research to do. As she worked outside her window, a young janitor and his mother were preparing to unlock a door that had stayed sealed for 16 years. And in the lobby below, a security guard named Lisa was making copies of that morning's incident report, carefully documenting every detail of Richard Sterling's strange reaction to Marcus Johnson's face. The truth, so long buried in Skyline Tower's foundation, was finally rising to the surface. Grace's small apartment was a 15-minute walk from Skyline Tower. She'd chosen it 16 years ago specifically for its view of the building, though she'd never admitted this to anyone. Now, as she unlocked the door with Marcus following close behind, the tower's silhouette loomed through her kitchen window like a steel and glass sentinel. Wait here, she told Marcus, disappearing into her bedroom. He heard the scrape of furniture, the creak of floorboards, then the distinct sound of a lock turning. When she returned, she carried a weathered wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. Thomas gave me this the week before he died, she said, setting it on the kitchen table. I've never shown it to anyone. Marcus pulled out a chair, the legs scraping against linoleum. The box seemed to pulse with untold secrets. Why now, Mom? Why not tell me all this years ago? Grace's fingers traced the inlay patterns. Because you were safe not knowing. Because Richard Sterling's reach is long and his memory longer. She took a deep breath. And because I promised Thomas I'd wait until you were old enough to understand and strong enough to handle the truth. She opened the box. Inside lay a collection of photographs, letters, and what looked like legal documents. On top was a photograph Marcus had never seen. His mother, young and radiant in a simple sundress, laughing as Thomas Sterling lifted her off her feet in what appeared to be a garden. I was 22, Grace began, her voice soft with memory, fresh out of college with a business degree no one would take seriously. The only job I could get was housekeeping for the Sterlings, she smiled faintly. Thomas found me in the library one night, reading his architectural magazines after my shift. Instead of reporting me, he pulled up a chair and started explaining. the designs. She laid out more photos. Thomas and Grace poring over blueprints, the two of them at what looked like a construction site, both wearing hard hats. Thomas teaching Grace to read technical drawings. He said I had an eye for detail, for the way things fit together. Started asking my opinion on his projects. Richard hated it, of course, the help getting ideas above their station. But Thomas didn't care about any of that. Marcus picked up one of the letters, his father's elegant handwriting flowing across the page. "My dearest Grace," it began, "the tower is nearly complete, and with it, our future. We kept it secret at first," Grace continued. It was easier that way. Thomas was working on Skyline Tower, his masterpiece, he called it. He'd figured out a way to make buildings more energy efficient, more sustainable. It would have revolutionized the industry. Her expression darkened. But Richard wanted to cut corners, use cheaper materials. They fought about it constantly. She pulled out a thick envelope, yellowed with age. "Then I got pregnant with you." Thomas was overjoyed. He'd already started changing his will, setting up trust funds. He was going to announce everything at the tower's opening ceremony, our relationship, the baby, his new construction standards. He said it was time for the Sterling legacy to stand for something more than just profit. Marcus unfolded a legal document from the envelope. "This is his will," he said, scanning the pages. "He left everything split between you and his unborn child. But this was never executed, was it?" Grace shook her head. The will that was read after his death was an older version. Everything went to Richard. She pulled out one final photograph. Thomas standing at the edge of an unfinished floor of Skyline Tower, the city spread out behind him. The night before he died, Thomas came to my apartment. He was excited but nervous. Said he'd found something in the construction records, something that could stop Richard from compromising the building's safety. What was it? He wouldn't tell me details, said it was safer if I didn't know, but he gave me that key and told me if anything happened to him, I should check his private office. Grace's hands trembled. The next morning, they said he fell, that he'd been drinking, lost his balance, but Thomas never drank on sight. Never. Marcus stared at the photograph of his father, trying to memorize every detail of his face. "Richard knows about me now. He'll come after us." "Yes," Grace's voice was steel, "but this time, we're ready. Thomas left us everything we need to prove what really happened. We just have to find it." She picked up the key she'd shown Marcus earlier. His office has been sealed since that night. Richard claimed it was out of respect, but I always wondered what he was hiding up there. Marcus finished. He stood, determination setting his features in a way that made him look even more like Thomas. "When do we go?" Grace checked her watch. "Richard has a board meeting all afternoon. Victoria never misses her Thursday yoga class. The cleaning crew won't start the executive floors until 6. She met her son's eyes. "We go now." Marcus nodded, gathering the documents and photos back into the box. As he did, a small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. He picked it up. A receipt from the tower's construction, with a handwritten note in Thomas's writing. "RS altered specs. Load-bearing capacity compromised. Must stop him. Lives at risk." Mother and son stared at the note, the full weight of Thomas's last discovery settling over them. This wasn't just about inheritance or family secrets anymore. Somewhere in that sealed office lay evidence that Richard Sterling had knowingly compromised the safety of every person who worked in Skyline Tower. "Mom," Marcus said quietly, "we need to hurry." The service elevator groaned as it climbed past the 30th floor. Grace and Marcus stood in silence, the wooden box clutched tightly in her arms, their reflections ghostly in the brushed steel walls. The key to Thomas's office felt heavy. In Marcus's pocket, a weight of history and responsibility pressing against his leg. At the 39th floor, Grace pressed the emergency stop. "The executive elevator is the only one that goes to 40, she explained. "But there's a maintenance ladder in the shaft. Thomas showed me once, said everyone should know the building's secrets." They climbed carefully, emerging into a darkness that hadn't been disturbed in 16 years. Grace's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing a corridor thick with dust. Their footprints marked their passage like evidence at a crime scene. "Here," Grace whispered, stopping before a heavy oak door. A brass nameplate still hung askew. Thomas Sterling, Chief Architect. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease. Inside, the office was a time capsule, papers still scattered across the desk, a half-empty coffee mug preserved in dust, Thomas's jacket still hanging on the coat rack as if he might return any moment to claim it. "Look for anything unusual," Grace said, moving to the desk. Thomas was methodical. If he found evidence against Richard, he would have protected it. Marcus ran his fingers along the bookshelf, testing for hollow spaces behind engineering texts. His father's presence seemed to fill the room, in the careful organization of blueprints, in the family photos on the walls, in the worn leather. Chair pulled slightly away from the desk, as if its occupant had just stepped out. "Mom," he called softly, pointing to a photograph he'd never seen before. It showed the Sterling brothers as children, arms around each other, gap-toothed grins. Identical. They really were close once, weren't they? Thomas said they were inseparable growing up. He never understood how Richard changed, became obsessed with power, with the family legacy. Grace opened a drawer, rifling through files. That's why Thomas's death never made sense. Despite everything, they were still brothers. A thick envelope slipped from between two folders, yellowed with age but sealed. Grace's name was written on the front in Thomas's distinctive hand, with a date, the day before his death. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter and a small USB drive. "My dearest Grace," she read aloud, her voice catching. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. I pray it hasn't, that I'll be able to tell you all this in person, but Richard's behavior lately has me worried. He's not just cutting corners anymore. He's putting lives at risk." Marcus moved closer as she continued reading. The building specs he submitted to the city aren't the ones being used in construction. He's substituting substandard materials, ignoring safety protocols. I've documented everything on the enclosed drive. Tomorrow at the board meeting, I'm going public with all of it. I've already contacted the authorities. But if something happens to me, you need to know the truth. The drive also contains proof of other crimes, falsified documents, bribes, evidence of what really happened to Dad's inheritance. Richard's been embezzling for years, using offshore accounts to hide the money. I'm sorry for keeping this from you, my love. I wanted to protect you and our child, but I can't stay silent anymore. Not when people's lives are at stake. There's one more thing. In the event of my death, a letter will be automatically sent to Victoria. She's always been smarter than Richard, more principled. She'll help you if you show her this evidence. All my love, Thomas P.S. The password for the drive is the date we first met, the real date, not the one Richard thinks. You're the only one who knows it. Grace pressed the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Marcus wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his own eyes burning. "He knew," Marcus said softly. "He knew Richard might try to stop him." "April 15th, Grace whispered. "That's the password, not the day I started working here, the night he found me reading in the library." A sound from the corridor froze them both. Footsteps getting closer. Marcus quickly pocketed the USB drive while Grace folded the letter, tucking it into her uniform. They looked frantically around the office for a hiding place. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A key scraped in the lock. Grace pulled Marcus behind a tall filing cabinet just as the door swung open. Through the narrow gap, they saw Victoria Sterling step into the office, her yoga clothes a strange contrast to the formal space. She walked straight to Thomas's desk, running her fingers along its edge as if searching for something. Then she spoke, her voice carrying clearly in the dusty silence. "You can come out now. I saw you take the service elevator up." She turned toward their hiding spot. "And I think it's time we all talked about what really happened to my brother-in-law." Victoria Sterling's private office was 3 floors below, accessed by a hidden elevator that Thomas had designed into the building's plans. As she led Grace and Marcus through the secret passage, her yoga mat still slung over her shoulder, Contrast between her polished exterior and this clandestine meeting wasn't lost on any of them. Thomas showed me these back passages during construction, Victoria explained, closing the elevator's concealed panel behind them. Said sometimes the most important conversations happen away from official channels. Her office was a study in understated power. All clean lines and muted colors, with a wall of screens displaying security feeds from throughout the building. Lisa Martinez's face appeared on one of them, and Victoria pressed an intercom button. "Lisa, can you bring up the archived footage we discussed? Use the secure server." "Already queued up, Mrs. Sterling," Lisa's voice crackled through the speaker. The screens flickered, and suddenly they were looking at Skyline Tower 16 years ago, still under construction. "I've been gathering evidence for years," Victoria said, typing commands into her keyboard. "Never enough to prove anything, but—" She glanced at Marcus. "When I saw you in the lobby today, I knew it was time." The footage showed Thomas Sterling moving through the unfinished building, inspecting work, checking specifications. In every frame, his movements were careful, deliberate, a man who knew every inch of his creation. "This is the night he died," Victoria said softly. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. Thomas was in his office. This very footage would have been recorded from the same camera that had caught them moments ago. They watched as Thomas carefully placed documents into an envelope. The same one Grace now carried. He made a phone call, his expression grave. Then Richard entered the frame. The brothers' conversation was silent, but their body language spoke volumes. Thomas gestured at blueprints, his movements becoming more animated. Richard's posture grew increasingly rigid. Then Thomas pulled out what looked like financial documents. "Can you enhance the paper he's holding?" Grace asked. Leaning forward, Victoria typed another command. The image zoomed in, revealing offshore account numbers and transfer records. "Thomas found the money trail," Victoria explained. "Richard had been siphoning funds for years, using them to bribe officials, cut corners on materials. When our father died, Richard somehow gained control of everything. Thomas never understood how. Until that night." On screen, Richard suddenly lunged for the papers. Thomas pulled back, saying something that made Richard's face contort with rage. The older Sterling brother stormed out, and Thomas quickly gathered his things, heading for the construction elevator. "The footage after this was corrupted," Victoria said. "Supposedly a power surge. The next camera picks him up on the 32nd floor. The new angle showed Thomas walking quickly, documents clutched to his chest. A shadow moved behind him, Richard following at a distance. The footage jumped, static cutting through. Crucial moments. "I've had tech experts working on recovering the corrupted sections," Victoria continued. "But Richard's been thorough in covering his tracks." "Maybe not thorough enough," Marcus said. He pulled out the USB drive. "We found this in Dad's office, along with a letter explaining everything." Victoria's eyes widened at Dad, but she quickly composed herself. The computer in Thomas's office was wiped clean. Richard made sure of that. "He didn't know about this," Grace said, taking the drive. Thomas hid it in a sealed envelope. "It has all the evidence, the real building specifications, the financial records, everything." "The password," Victoria began. "I know it," Grace interrupted. "But before we open this, you need to understand what's at stake." Thomas didn't just find evidence of fraud. He discovered that Richard compromised the building's structural integrity. People's lives are at risk. Victoria sank into her chair. "I've suspected something like this. Small things, maintenance reports that don't add up, stress tests that seem too perfect." She looked up at the security feeds, at the hundreds of people going about their day in the tower. "How bad is it?" "We won't know until we see the files," Marcus said. "But if Richard was willing to kill his own brother to keep this secret—" A notification popped up on Victoria's screen. Richard's calendar. The board meeting was ending. "He'll check the security feeds when he returns," Victoria said. "He always does. We need to move quickly." She turned to Lisa's screen. "How long can you loop the footage of my office?" 20 minutes, tops," Lisa replied. After that, the system flags any anomalies. Victoria plugged in the USB drive. Grace? The password? Grace leaned forward, typing in the date. The drive hummed to life, folders appearing on screen. But before they could open them, another notification flashed. Richard's private elevator was moving. He's coming up early, Lisa warned. Victoria quickly ejected the drive, handing it back to Grace. My private entrance, she said, pointing to a hidden door behind a painting. It leads to the service stairs. I'll delay Richard, but you need to go, now. As Grace and Marcus slipped through the secret door, Victoria called after them softly, Thomas was the best of us. Help me make this right. The door clicked shut just as Richard's voice boomed through the intercom. Victoria, why is my office? Key missing? Marcus and Grace descended the stairs silently, the USB drive burning with secrets in her pocket. Behind them, they could hear Victoria's smooth voice weaving explanations, buying them precious time. But they all knew time was running out for them and for everyone in Skyline Tower. Richard Sterling burst into Victoria's office like a storm front, his board meeting composure completely shattered. Why was the door to Thomas's office unlocked? Who's been up there? Victoria kept her expression neutral as she closed her laptop. I needed some old architectural plans. The archives said they might be in his files. The lie rolled off her tongue smoothly, practiced over years of marriage to a man who dealt in deceptions. Those files are sealed, Richard snarled, pacing the office like a caged animal. Everything in that office is sealed. You know that. Do I? Victoria stood, matching his intensity with Arctic calm. Like I know why you've been paying Grace Johnson through a shadow account for 16 years? Or why you looked like you'd seen a ghost when her son stood up to you this morning? Richard froze. You're overstepping, Victoria. No, I'm finally stepping up. She moved to the window, looking out at the city their family had helped build. Thomas's son. That's who Marcus Johnson is, isn't he? The timing fits. The resemblance is undeniable. Did you know? All these years, did you know your brother's child was right here, under our roof? There's no proof of any of that, Richard said, but his voice had lost its edge. Thomas had relationships, inappropriate ones. It doesn't make every claim legitimate. Victoria turned to face her husband. 25 years of marriage had taught her to read the micro-expressions that crossed his face. Fear, guilt, and something deeper, a desperate need to maintain control. The board is already asking questions about this morning's incident, she pressed. The videos are spreading. People are digging into the Sterling family history. It's only a matter of time before someone connects the dots. Then we'll disconnect them. Richard's voice turned silky, dangerous. We've handled worse. Scandals. Have we? Like we handled Thomas's death? The words hung in the air between them. Richard's face went through a complicated series of emotions before settling into something hard and cold. My brother died in an accident, he said carefully. The investigation was thorough. The case is closed. Is it? Victoria moved to her desk, pressed a button. Security footage from that night filled her screens. Because I've been watching this footage for years, Richard, frame by frame, the corrupted sections, the missing minutes, it's all too convenient. Turn that off. No. Victoria's voice was steel. I've waited 16 years for answers. Thomas was my friend before he was my brother-in-law. He trusted me with things, about the building's construction, about the company finances, about Grace. Richard lunged for the computer controls, but Victoria was faster, locking the system with a keystroke. Don't, she warned. Everything I've found is already backed up. If anything happens to me, it all goes public. You're threatening me? Your own husband? I'm trying to save you. Victoria softened her tone. The truth is coming out, Richard. Today's incident with Marcus was just the beginning. Help me make this right. For Thomas's son, for the people who work in this building. Something flickered in Richard's eyes. A moment of uncertainty, almost grief. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. You've always been clever. Victoria, it's why I married you. But you're forgetting something crucial. He straightened his tie, a gesture she'd seen thousands of times before board meetings and hostile takeovers. The Sterling legacy is bigger than any one person, bigger than Thomas's mistakes, bigger than some janitor's son playing hero. The building isn't safe, Victoria pressed. Thomas found proof. Thomas found nothing. Richard's composure cracked. He was going to destroy everything our father built. Everything I've protected. I couldn't let that happen. The confession hung between them. Victoria felt a chill run down her spine as the last pieces clicked into place. What did you do to him, Richard? Instead of answering, he pulled out his phone. Security, I need a team to my wife's office immediately. Mrs. Sterling is feeling unwell. She needs to be escorted home. Victoria's hand moved to her own phone, but Richard was faster, snatching it from her desk. You're going to take a nice long rest, dear, he said, his voice almost gentle. Doctor's orders, and while you're recovering, I'll handle this situation. With the Johnson boy and his mother. If you touch them, I won't have to. Richard's smile was cold. They'll leave on their own, just like Grace did 16 years ago. Amazing how quickly people disappear when their loved ones are threatened. Security officers appeared in the doorway, not the regular building staff, but private contractors Victoria had never seen before. Please escort my wife to the car, Richard instructed, and have someone sweep this office. My wife may have misplaced some sensitive company documents. As the men approached her, Victoria locked eyes with her husband. You can't bury the truth forever, Richard. Thomas made sure of that. Richard's confident smile faltered for just a moment. Watch me. But as they led Victoria away, she allowed herself a small, secret smile. Richard hadn't noticed the security camera in the corner of her office, the one that had just recorded his indirect confession, and he hadn't seen her press the emergency alert button under her desk, sending a signal to the one person who could still help. Lisa Martinez, whose security station was currently receiving a live feed of everything that had just happened. The game wasn't over. It was just moving to a new phase. Lisa Martinez's hands flew over her security console, archiving the footage from Victoria's office before Richard's private security team could erase it. Her heart pounded as she watched them escort Victoria through the lobby, remembering the emergency signal that had flashed across her screen moments ago. Come on, she muttered, sending the encrypted files to her secure server. A movement on another monitor caught her eye. Grace and Marcus emerging from the service stairwell into the basement parking garage. She grabbed her radio. Grace, Marcus, don't leave the building. Meet me at Loading Dock 3. Now. The maintenance area behind Loading Dock 3 had been Lisa's secret smoking spot for years. Now, as Grace and Marcus slipped through the service entrance, the cramped space felt like the last safe corner of Skyline Tower. Richard's got Victoria, Lisa explained quickly. Private security, but she managed to record his confession about Thomas. I have the footage, but we need more, Marcus finished. The USB drive proves the building's unsafe, but without hard copies of Dad's original documents, they'd be in the safe, Grace said suddenly. Thomas told me once, behind the painting of the tower's original design. He said Richard never knew about it because it wasn't in the official plans. Lisa checked her monitors. Richard's team is sweeping Victoria's office. They'll head to Thomas's next. Then we go now. Marcus straightened, his father's determination evident in his stance. Lisa, can you loop the 40th floor footage? For maybe 10 minutes. After that, the system flags any anomalies. That's all we need. They took the service elevator again. Lisa's security override, bypassing the usual restrictions. The 40th floor was still dark, still heavy with 16 years of undisturbed secrets. Inside Thomas's office, Grace went straight to the large architectural rendering on the west wall. The painting showed Skyline Tower as Thomas had originally envisioned it, not just a monument to wealth and power, but a blueprint for sustainable, safe construction. Help me with this, she whispered. Marcus and Lisa carefully lifted the heavy frame, revealing a wall safe cleverly integrated into the building's structure. The combination, Grace breathed. It would be April 15th, Marcus said, like the USB drive. Grace spun the dial, 4:15. The safe clicked open. Inside they found a leather portfolio, its pages crisp despite the years. Lisa stood guard. At the door, while Grace and Marcus spread the documents across Thomas's desk. Original building specifications, Marcus said, scanning the papers. Load-bearing calculations, material requirements. Dad marked all the places Richard cut corners. The differences in cost. Over $50 million, Grace calculated quickly. Money Richard pocketed by using substandard materials. Look at this. Marcus held up a structural analysis. The upper floors, they're carrying too much weight. The steel they actually used isn't rated for... A distant elevator chime cut him off. Security sweeps reaching this floor, Lisa warned. 2 minutes, tops. They quickly photographed every document with their phones. Grace was about to return the portfolio to the safe when something caught her eye. A small red notebook tucked in the back. Thomas's personal journal, she whispered, recognizing the handwriting. She flipped to the last entry, dated the night he died. R confronted me about the specs, says I'm betraying the family legacy. But the real legacy dies if we put profit over people's lives. The stress tests don't lie. This building isn't safe, not as he's building it. Meeting tomorrow with state investigators. Have all the proof, fake inspection reports, bribed officials, offshore accounts where the construction money really went. R thinks fear and money can keep people quiet forever. He's wrong. If anything happens to me, the truth is in 3 places. This safe, the USB drive, and with someone R would never suspect. Victoria's smarter than he knows. She's been tracking the money for months. Grace, my love, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. Sorry I won't see our child grow up. Sorry I couldn't finish what I started. But you're the strongest person I know. You'll find a way to make this right. To my unborn child, know that I loved you before I ever met you. And know that the truth, no matter how long buried, has a way of rising to the light. Footsteps echoed. In the corridor. Grace clutched the journal to her chest. We can't put it back. He has to know we found it. Marcus nodded, understanding. They closed the safe, replaced the painting. Back exit, Lisa hissed. Now! They slipped out just as flashlight beams cut through the office darkness. In the hidden service corridor, Grace finally let out the breath she'd been holding. We have everything now, she said. The USB drive, the journal, the security footage of Richard's confession. It's enough. Not quite, Marcus said grimly. We need Victoria. She's the only one who can officially verify the financial records. Without her, then we get her out, Lisa said. She checked her phone. My contact at the Meridian Hotel confirms. Richard's security team checked her in. 12th floor. 2 guards. Marcus squared his shoulders, looking so much like Thomas in that moment that Grace's heart ached. How do we get past them? Lisa smiled. You forget, I have the master key to every Sterling property in the city, including their hotels. We move tonight, Grace decided, before Richard realizes what we found. And then, Marcus asked, Grace thought of Thomas's last words in the journal, of his belief in truth and justice. Then, we bring it all down. The lies, the cover-ups, all of it. We make the Sterling legacy what it should have been all along. Your father would be proud, Lisa told Marcus softly. In Grace's pocket, Thomas's journal pressed against her heart like a promise finally kept. Richard Sterling's reflection glared back at him from his office window, distorted by the setting sun. The whiskey in his hand, his 4th of the evening, did nothing to steady his nerves. On his desk, social media notifications kept piling. Up shot Skyline bully, justice for Thomas. How is Marcus Johnson? His phone buzzed again. The head of his private security team, Mrs. Sterling's requesting dinner. Should we allow room service? No outside contact, Richard snapped. She needs to rest. Doctor's orders. He ended the call and pulled up the surveillance photos his team had taken throughout the day. Marcus and Grace leaving the tower. Lisa. Martinez at her security station. The maintenance staff whispering in corners. 16 years of careful control, unraveling in a single day. A soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Sarah Chen stood in his doorway, holding a stack of tax documents. The same young mother he'd humiliated that morning. Was it only this morning? Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice steady, despite her obvious nervousness. These need your signature before close of business. He waved her in, grateful for the mundane distraction. But as she approached his desk, he noticed she wasn't alone. Other employees had gathered in the corridor outside his office, their murmured conversations just loud enough to hear. Looks exactly like Thomas Sterling. Victoria taken away by private security. More building safety concerns. That will be all, Richard barked at Sarah, snatching the documents from her hands. But she didn't move. Sir, she said, drawing herself up. The staff is concerned about Mrs. Sterling, and there are rumors about structural issues. Rumors? Richard's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Spread by a teenage janitor and his mother? By my mentally unstable wife? By your dead brother. The words hung in the air between them. In the corridor, the whispers grew louder. Richard stood slowly, his imposing height meant to intimidate. You're fired, Ms. Chen. All of you lurking out there, fired. Clear out your desks. Security will escort you out. No, they won't. Lisa Martinez stepped through the crowd, her raw security badge gleaming. Your private contractors can't override building security protocols, and according to those protocols, mass termination requires board approval. I am the board. Richard slammed his hand on the desk. The crowd flinched, but no one moved. Actually, a new voice called from the back, you're only one vote. Howard Chen, the building's chief engineer, pushed forward, and we've just received some very interesting documentation about the building's construction. Documentation that requires immediate board review. Richard's face went pale. Who gave you? It was anonymous, Howard said, but his eyes flickered to Lisa. Structural integrity reports, material specifications, safety violations that could put everyone in this building at risk. The crowd's whispers turned to angry murmurs. Richard reached for his phone, but Lisa was faster. Building Security Protocol 23B, she announced clearly. In the event of credible safety concerns, the chief engineer has authority to order an immediate inspection, with or without owner approval. This is insane, Richard sputtered. We can and we are. Howard held up his tablet, displaying official inspection orders. My team is already examining the upper floors. If we find evidence that matches these documents, get out! Richard roared. All of you! But no one moved. Instead, more people pressed into the office doorway. Maintenance workers, security staff, office employees. All watching, all witnesses to the great Richard Sterling's unraveling. Sarah Chen stepped forward again, her voice clear. We've called OSHA and the city building inspector. They're on their way. And sir, that mother you screamed at this morning, she's not the only one with videos of your behavior. We've all seen things over the years, kept quiet out of fear, but not anymore. Richard's hand shook as he reached for his whiskey glass. You have no idea what you're doing. The consequences. We know exactly what we're doing, Lisa cut in. Standing up to a bully, just like Marcus Johnson did, just like Thomas Sterling tried to do 16 years ago. The name hit Richard like a physical blow. He staggered, catching himself on the desk's edge. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, emergency lights suddenly flashed in the gathering dusk. Police cars, news vans, a crowd gathering at the tower's base. Richard's phone buzzed one final time. A text from his head of security. Mrs. Sterling's gone. Hotel room empty. Backup cameras show maintenance access. Should we implement Protocol Zero? Before he could respond, Howard's tablet beeped urgently. The engineer's face went grave as he read the incoming data. Upper floor stress tests confirming original documents, he announced to the crowd. Significant deviation from safety standards. We need to begin evacuation procedures. As if on cue, the building's fire alarm began to wail. Richard Sterling, master of the Sterling Empire, keeper of deadly secrets, stood alone in his office as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. Through the window, he could see his brother's face reflected in the glass, superimposed over the chaos below. Or was it Marcus's face? In the dying light, it was impossible to tell the difference. The Skyline Tower lobby had never seen a crowd like this. News cameras jostled for position as reporters packed the marble expanse where, just 24 hours earlier, a teenage janitor had stood up to one of the city's most powerful men. Police. Officers lined the walls while city building inspectors huddled with Howard Chen, reviewing data on tablets and laptops. Victoria Sterling stood at the makeshift podium, her elegant composure restored after her escape from the Meridian Hotel. Grace and Marcus flanked her on one side, Lisa Martinez on the other. Behind them, a projection screen displayed damning evidence: construction photos, financial records, and, most devastatingly, the security footage of Richard's confession. 16 years ago, Victoria began, her voice carrying through the hushed lobby. My brother-in-law, Thomas Sterling, discovered something disturbing about this building's construction. Today, we finally know the full truth of what he found and why he died trying to expose it. Camera flashes exploded as Victoria held up Thomas's red journal. This is Thomas Sterling's personal record of the criminal conspiracy he uncovered, a conspiracy that not only defrauded investors and endangered lives, but led to his murder at the hands of his own brother. The crowd erupted with questions. Victoria raised a hand for silence. The evidence is comprehensive and has been turned over to the district attorney's office. But the most immediate concern is public safety. Howard Chen, our chief engineer, will now present his findings. Howard stepped forward, his usual quiet demeanor strengthened by purpose. Our emergency inspection confirms Thomas Sterling's original assessment. The building's upper floors are critically compromised due to substandard materials and ignored safety protocols. We've already begun evacuation procedures, and a commotion at the back of the lobby cut him off. Richard Sterling burst through the crowd, his private security team shoving reporters aside. His usual impeccable appearance was disheveled, his eyes wild. "This is slander," he shouted. "Corporate espionage. I'll sue every one of you for what, Richard?" Victoria's voice cut through his ranting. "For exposing the truth? For finishing what Thomas started?" "Thomas was a fool," Richard spat. "He would have destroyed everything our father built, just like you're trying to do now." "No." Marcus stepped forward, and the crowd gasped at his resemblance to the photos of young Thomas now displayed on the screen. "My father tried to save lives. You're the one who destroyed the Sterling legacy." Richard's face contorted. "You're nothing. The bastard son of a housekeeper. You have no right to—" "He has every right." Grace's quiet voice carried surprising authority. "Thomas left proof of everything. The real building plans, the offshore accounts, and this." She held up a DNA test result, proof that Marcus is Thomas Sterling's legal heir. The cameras went crazy. Richard lunged for the podium, but police officers were faster, grabbing his arms. "You can't prove any of this," he yelled. "It's all circumstantial." "Actually," Lisa stepped up, holding her tablet, "we can prove everything. You just confessed, again, on live television." Richard's face went slack as he realized the news cameras were still rolling, broadcasting his meltdown to the entire city. Victoria took control again. "As of this morning, the Sterling Properties Board has voted to remove Richard Sterling as CEO. A full investigation will determine the extent of the criminal liability, but our immediate priority is public safety." She turned to face the cameras. "Directly. To all tenants and employees of Sterling Properties, we will cover relocation costs during safety inspections. To those who stayed silent out of fear, you no longer have to. And to the investors and officials who participated in this cover-up, the district attorney's office is very interested in speaking with you. You'll regret this," Richard snarled, as officers began reading him his rights. "All of you." "No, Richard," Victoria said softly. "The only regret is that it took us 16 years to bring Thomas's killer to justice." The officers led Richard away, his shouts fading into the lobby's marble depths. As if on cue, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, streaming through the glass walls. It caught the model of the original Skyline Tower design, Thomas's vision of what the building should have been. Marcus stepped to the podium. The reporters fell silent, struck by how much he looked like the architectural photos of his father displayed behind him. 16 years ago, my father wrote something in his journal. He said the truth, no matter how long buried, has a way of rising to the light. Marcus's voice grew stronger. Today, we honor his legacy by bringing that truth forward. The Sterling name will no longer stand for greed and corruption. Instead, we'll rebuild not just this tower, but everything the Sterling Foundation touches, according to my father's original vision: safe, sustainable, and honest. Grace slipped her hand into her son's, and Victoria stepped up beside them. United, they faced the cameras, the future, and the legacy Thomas had died protecting. Behind them, the image of Thomas Sterling smiled down from the screen, his dream of truth and justice finally realized through the son he'd never met, but had loved enough to die for. The Sterling Properties conference room had been transformed into a makeshift command center. 3 days after Richard's arrest, Victoria sat at the head of the table, surrounded by lawyers, investigators, and a growing mountain of evidence. Every hour brought new revelations, new victims, new threads in the tapestry of Richard's corruption. Another whistleblower has come forward, announced Maya Rodriguez, the investigative journalist who'd been covering the story since the press conference. She laid a folder on the table. James Cooper, former site manager at Sterling Heights Development, says he was fired in 2015 after questioning material substitutions similar to what Thomas found here. Add it to the timeline, Victoria instructed her team. The wall behind her was covered with a massive chronological display, photos, documents, and sticky notes tracking 2 decades of Richard's schemes. The door opened and Grace entered with Marcus and Lisa. The structural engineers finished their preliminary assessment of our other properties, Grace reported. 3 more buildings showed critical safety issues. Victoria rubbed her temples. How many people need immediate relocation? Over 2,000, Lisa said grimly. But we've secured temporary housing arrangements with the Hilton Group. They're offering displaced residents priority booking at reduced rates. Use the emergency fund Thomas set up, Victoria decided. Make sure no one pays anything out of pocket. Marcus studied the timeline wall, his expression thoughtful. All these people, they tried to speak up over the years, but Richard always managed to silence them. Money usually, Maya confirmed, but sometimes more direct threats. She pulled up an email on her laptop. This just came in from Thomas's old friend Michael Wright. He was there the night Thomas died. The room fell silent as Maya read, "I should have said something sooner. That night I was working late, reviewing blueprints with Thomas. He was excited about something he'd discovered, proof of Richard's kickback scheme with a materials supplier. Said he had copies of everything in 3 separate locations. Richard came in, furious. He'd found out Thomas was meeting with state investigators. The next day, the argument got heated. Thomas mentioned a letter he'd written, something about his insurance policy. Said Grace wasn't the only one who knew the truth. I left them arguing. An hour later, Thomas was dead. Richard's people called it an accident, but there was nothing accidental about it. The next day, my daughter lost her scholarship to private school. My wife's business loans were suddenly called in. The message was clear. Stay quiet or lose everything. I'm sorry, Victoria. I'm sorry, Grace. Most of all, I'm sorry to you, Marcus. Your father was the best man I knew. Grace's hands trembled as she set down her coffee cup. There were rumors, back then, people who suddenly transferred, who left the company with generous severance packages. Buying silence? Victoria nodded. But he couldn't buy everyone. She pointed to another section of the timeline. Look at this pattern. Every few years, someone would get close to exposing him. Each time, Richard's response got more aggressive. Lisa pulled up security footage on her tablet. We've been reviewing old tapes. Found something interesting from 2019. The video showed Richard in a parking garage arguing with a young engineer. That's David Martinez. No relation, Lisa added. He died in a car accident 2 days after this. The original investigation found brake failure, just like what Richard tried with Thomas, Marcus said quietly. How many others? Maya's fingers flew over her keyboard. I'm compiling a database. So far, we've identified 37 former employees who reported safety concerns. 23 were fired. 8 took settlements. 4 died in accidents. The rest learned to look the other way, Victoria finished, like I did. For too long, a young intern burst into the room, waving a printout. Mrs. Sterling, Channel 7 just received an anonymous tip. Someone claiming to be Richard's former driver wants to talk. Says he has dashcam footage from the night Mr. Thomas died. Victoria exchanged looks with Grace and Marcus. Get him in here, now. As the intern hurried out, Maya's phone buzzed with another email alert. More coming in. A former Sterling Properties accountant says she helped set up the offshore accounts Richard used to hide the construction kickbacks. Has all the transaction records. The dam's breaking, Lisa observed. Once people saw Richard in handcuffs, they lost their fear. Marcus walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline his father had helped shape. All these years, they carried these secrets, lived with the guilt, the fear. He turned back to the room. We need to protect them, all of them. Make sure Richard can't hurt anyone else, even from jail. Victoria nodded. The board's approved a victims' compensation fund, and we're offering legal support to anyone who wants to testify. It's not just about money, Grace said. These people need to know they're not alone anymore. That speaking up matters. Then we give them a platform. Maya's eyes lit up with professional excitement. A formal commission, public hearings, let everyone tell their stories. The full truth, Marcus agreed, no matter how ugly. Victoria studied the timeline wall, the pattern of silence and fear Richard had woven through so many lives. Thomas believed in building things that would last, structures that would stand the test of time. She stood, addressing the room. It's time we built something new, a foundation of truth, a legacy of justice. Outside the conference room, the phones kept ringing. More stories, more victims, more threads of truth, weaving together to form a noose around Richard Sterling's neck. And somewhere, in whatever cell held him, Richard Sterling was learning the hardest lesson of all, that fear could silence people for years, but courage, once awakened, was impossible to contain. Frank Reeves had aged considerably in 16 years. The former Sterling Properties driver sat hunched in the conference room chair, his weathered hands clutching a USB drive like a lifeline. Dark circles under his eyes suggested sleepless nights, and his voice trembled as he spoke. I should have come forward sooner, he began, avoiding Marcus's gaze. Your father, Mr. Thomas, he was always kind to me, asked about my family, remembered my kids' names. Victoria gestured to the legals team to begin recording. The room was packed now, police investigators, prosecutors, and Maya Rodriguez with her ever-present notebook. Grace sat beside Marcus, their hands linked beneath the table. Tell us about the night of April 23, 2009, the lead detective prompted gently. Frank closed his eyes, remembering. I was Mr. Richard's personal driver back then. That night, he called around 10, said he needed me at the tower. Unusual hour, but you didn't question Mr. Richard. He plugged in the USB drive, and grainy dashcam footage filled the wall screen. The timestamp showed 10:47 p.m. I kept copies of all my dashcam videos, Frank explained. Company policy. Never thought I'd need this one until... He glanced at Marcus. Until I saw your face in the news, like seeing Mr. Thomas's ghost. The footage showed Richard Sterling emerging from Skyline Tower's service entrance, his usual composed demeanor notably absent. He was making a call, pacing frantically. Turn up the audio, Victoria instructed. Richard's voice crackled through the speakers. It's done. No witnesses. The evidence is contained. He won't be meeting with any investigators tomorrow. Frank's hands shook harder. 20 minutes later, they announced Mr. Thomas's accident. But I'd seen Mr. Richard earlier, arguing with him in the parking garage. Mr. Thomas was saying something about safety violations, about going public. Did you see the actual fall? The detective asked carefully. No. But I saw Mr. Richard on the 32nd floor shortly before. He'd told me to park at the service entrance and wait. Said his brother might need a ride home later. Frank's voice broke. There was never going to be a ride home. Maya leaned forward. The security footage from that floor was corrupted. Convenient timing. Richard had access to the security. Systems, Lisa confirmed, could have deleted anything incriminating. But he couldn't delete this, Frank said, fast-forwarding the footage. The timestamp now showed 11:53 p.m. Richard reappeared, his suit disheveled, something dark staining his sleeve. Grace gasped softly. Marcus squeezed her hand harder. "Play that section again," the detective instructed. "Clear as day, blood on his cuff. And look at his hands." The footage showed Richard frantically wiping his hands with a handkerchief before getting into the car. Frank's voice was barely a whisper now. "He made me drive him home. The whole way he kept muttering about the greater good, about protecting the family legacy. Said Thomas was going to destroy everything." "Did he explicitly confess to killing Thomas?" the prosecutor asked. "He didn't have to. I heard him on the phone with someone, maybe his security team. Said to make it look like an accident and clean up the 32nd floor." Frank finally met Marcus's eyes. "The next day, my mortgage was mysteriously paid off. My kids' college funds were fully funded. The message was clear." Marcus stood abruptly, moving to the window. The same window his father had supposedly fallen from. "He bought your silence." "Yes?" Frank's admission was heavy with shame. "I told myself it was for my family, that coming forward wouldn't bring Mr. Thomas back. But seeing you at that press conference, hearing about the building's safety issues," he pulled out a sealed envelope. "There's one more thing. Mr. Thomas left this in my car the day before. Said if anything happened to him, I should get it. To someone named Grace." Grace's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph and a short note. The photo showed Thomas holding a very pregnant Grace, both of them laughing in the sunshine. The note read, "My dearest, if you're reading this, I failed to stop Richard, but I succeeded in the thing that matters most, loving you and our child. The truth is in the walls, Grace, literally. Check behind the panel marked TS on the 32nd floor. I love you both, Thomas." The room erupted in activity. Lisa was already calling Howard Chen about accessing the marked panel. The detective was bagging the USB drive as evidence. The prosecutor was preparing Frank's official statement. But Marcus couldn't look away from the photograph, his father and mother, happy and hopeful before Richard Sterling's greed destroyed everything. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to find Victoria. "We've got him," she said softly. "Frank's testimony, the dash cam footage, and whatever's behind that panel, it's over." "No," Marcus replied, his father's determination in his voice. "It's not over until every person Richard hurt sees justice, until every building he compromised is made safe, until the Sterling name means what my father always wanted it to mean." Through the window, the sun broke through storm clouds, illuminating Skyline Tower like a beacon. Somewhere on the 32nd floor, behind a panel marked with his father's initials, the final pieces of Thomas Sterling's legacy waited to be found. Frank Reeves watched the young man silhouetted against the window, Thomas Sterling's son, carrying his father's dreams forward. The weight of 16 years of silence finally lifted from his shoulders. The truth, so long buried, was rising, and this time, no amount of money could stop it. The 32nd floor panel marked TS contained exactly what Thomas Sterling had promised: a waterproof case filled with documents, photos, and a micro recorder. But it was the final item that proved most damning: a security badge spattered, with blood Richard Sterling's name and photo clearly visible. Detective Sarah Martinez stood in Richard's holding cell, holding up the evidence bag containing the badge. "Want to explain this, Mr. Sterling? Found right where your brother said it would be." Richard sat on the narrow bed, his designer's suit exchanged for prison orange, his empire crumbling beyond the concrete walls. "I want my lawyer." "Your lawyer's busy," Martinez replied coolly. "Apparently he's cutting a deal with the DA, something about 16 years of helping cover up corporate fraud, manslaughter, and now murder." The word murder seemed to echo in the small space. Richard's carefully maintained facade cracked slightly. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can prove everything." She opened a folder. "Frank Reeves's dash cam footage, your blood-stained sleeve, the recording Thomas made of your argument about the building safety violations, and this." She pressed play on her phone. Richard's own voice filled the cell. He was going to destroy everything, had to protect the legacy, made it look like an accident. "Your confession to Victoria," Martinez explained, "recorded in her office the day you had her forcibly removed. But the best evidence?" She smiled grimly. "The DNA under Thomas's fingernails, preserved all these years in the medical examiner's storage. A perfect match to you, Mr. Sterling." Richard lunged forward, his composure finally shattering. "He gave me no choice. That self-righteous fool was going to ruin us. All those safety concerns, all that talk about ethical building practices. He would have bankrupted the company. Instead, you bankrupted your soul." Marcus's voice came from the cell doorway. He stood there with Grace and Victoria watching. His uncle's downfall. Richard fell back onto the bed, laughing bitterly. "Come to gloat, nephew? To watch the mighty Richard Sterling in chains?" "No," Marcus said quietly. "I came to understand. How could you kill your own brother, your partner, over money?" "It wasn't about money," Richard shouted. "It was about legacy, power." Thomas never understood that. He thought buildings were about keeping people safe, about doing good in the world. Pathetic idealism. He was right. Victoria stepped forward. "The board just finished its emergency session. Every building, every project will be inspected. Any safety violation will be corrected, no matter the cost. The Sterling legacy will be what Thomas always wanted it to be." Richard's face contorted. "You're destroying everything I built." "No," Grace's voice was steel. "We're rebuilding everything you destroyed, starting with the truth about Thomas's death." Detective Martinez cleared her throat. "Richard Sterling, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Sterling. You have the right to remain silent." "I want a deal," Richard interrupted desperately. "I know things about other projects, other accidents, people who helped cover everything up." "We already have their names," Martinez continued the Miranda rights. "Frank Reeves wasn't the only one keeping records. Your private security team rolled over first, then your accountants. Amazing how quickly loyalty crumbles when faced with conspiracy charges." As Martinez led Richard away, he stopped before Marcus. "You look so much like him. Same foolish idealism in your eyes. He never understood what it takes to succeed in this world." "No," Marcus replied. "You never understood what real success looks like. Dad knew it wasn't about power or money. It was about building something that helps people, that makes the world better." Richard's smirk faltered. For a moment, he seemed to see Thomas standing behind his son, the brother he'd murdered, the legacy he'd tried to bury, rising again through the next generation. The holding cell door clanged shut. Through the bars, they watched Richard Sterling, once the king of the city's skyline, sink onto the narrow bed, finally alone with his crimes. Outside the police station, reporters swarmed. Maya Rodriguez's voice carried over the chaos. "Sources confirm Richard Sterling has been charged with the murder of his brother Thomas Sterling. Additionally, investigations are ongoing into multiple cases of fraud, criminal negligence, and possible connections to other suspicious deaths." Victoria addressed the press with practiced grace. "Sterling Properties is cooperating fully with authorities. Our immediate focus remains on ensuring the safety of all our buildings and protecting the people who live and work in them." Grace. And Marcus stood slightly apart from the media frenzy. She touched the photograph in her pocket, herself and Thomas, young and in love, their whole future ahead of them. "Your father would be proud," she told Marcus softly. "Not just of exposing the truth, but of how you're carrying his vision forward." Marcus watched the police car carrying Richard disappear around the corner. The work's just beginning. All those buildings to inspect, safety measures to implement. Then we'd better get started. Grace squared her shoulders. Thomas always said the best way to honor someone's memory is to finish what they started. Above them, Skyline Tower caught the morning light, its windows reflecting a new day dawning. Soon, crews would begin the painstaking process of examining every beam, every joint, making the building what Thomas had always intended, a testament not to power, but to protection, not to greed, but to grace. And somewhere, perhaps, Thomas Sterling was smiling. 1 month after Richard Sterling's arrest, the Skyline Tower lobby hosted a very different kind of gathering. Where there had once been press conferences and police, now there were round tables decorated with white lilies, Thomas's favorite flower. Photos of Thomas Sterling lined the walls, showing him not as the wealthy architect, but as the man he truly was, laughing with construction workers, teaching Grace about blueprints, proudly displaying his Sustainable Design Awards. Victoria Sterling stood at the entrance, welcoming former employees and their families. Many had testified against Richard, breaking 16 years of silence. Now they came together not in fear, but in healing. Mrs. Sterling, Sarah Chen, approached, holding little Lily, who was now crawling. "The child care center plans you wanted to review." She handed over a folder with one hand while bouncing her daughter with the other. Victoria smiled, remembering the morning that had started everything. The Thomas Sterling Memorial Daycare Center, first of its kind in any corporate building in the city. "How fitting that you're heading up the project." "It was Marcus's idea," Sarah replied. "He said every parent deserves a safe place for their children, regardless of their position in the company." Across the lobby, Marcus and Grace were deep in conversation with Howard Chen, reviewing plans for the building's structural renovations. The young man's passionate gestures mirrored his father's in the photos above, the same dedication to doing things right, to protecting people. "The upper floor reinforcements are ahead of schedule," Howard was saying, "and the new safety protocols Marcus designed, other companies are already asking to implement them." Grace beamed with pride, but her eyes kept drifting to the lobby's newest installation, a wall of monitors displaying live safety metrics from every Sterling building. Complete transparency, just as Thomas would have wanted. Lisa Martinez approached their group, tablet in hand. "The last of the displaced residents are moving back in tomorrow. Every apartment has been inspected and certified safe." She grinned. "And wait until you see what the maintenance team found in the old storage room." She led them to a previously locked room off the main lobby. Inside, carefully preserved, were Thomas's original architectural models, including his design for a rooftop garden that had never been built. "Dad's Green Building Initiative," Marcus said softly, touching the miniature trees. Richard called it a waste of money. "Not anymore," Victoria joined them, Sarah and Lily in tow. "The board unanimously approved the full implementation of Thomas's original environmental plans, solar panels, rainwater recycling, the works." Grace picked up a tiny model figure that looked remarkably like Thomas. "He used to work on these late at night. Said buildings shouldn't just be about profit, they should give something back to the world." Speaking of giving back, Victoria pulled out an envelope. "The Victims' Compensation Fund is ready. Full repayment to everyone Richard cheated, plus funding for a scholarship program in Thomas's name." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "A month ago, people were afraid to even mention Dad's name in this building. Now he's everywhere," Lisa finished, "as he should be." They returned to the lobby where more people were arriving. Michael Wright, Thomas's old friend, was showing his daughter the Sustainability Awards. Frank Reeves and his family sat with other former employees, sharing stories of Thomas's kindness. Even the current maintenance staff, wearing new uniforms with TS Properties embroidered above their hearts, moved through the crowd with pride. "I have something for you," Victoria told Marcus quietly, handing him a key. "Thomas's old office. We've restored it exactly as it was. I thought maybe you'd like to use it." Marcus turned the key over in his hands. "The 32nd floor?" 32nd floor, Victoria confirmed. "Where everything ended for Thomas, but where things are just beginning for you." Grace touched her son's arm. "You don't have to." "No, I want to," Marcus said firmly. "Dad's legacy isn't about that night anymore. It's about everything he stood for, everything he built." He looked around the lobby at all the lives touched by Thomas's vision, everything we're building now. Sarah Chen approached again, this time with news. "The first Thomas Sterling Memorial Scholarship recipients are here, high school students interested in sustainable architecture." As if on cue, a group of teenagers entered, their eyes wide at the soaring lobby. Marcus watched them, remembering how he'd once been just a janitor's son. unknowingly carrying his father's dreams. "Show them around," he told Sarah. "Show them everything, especially the safety features. Dad always said knowledge shared is knowledge doubled." Victoria checked her watch. "The dedication ceremony starts in 10 minutes. Grace, would you do the honors?" Grace straightened her blazer, no longer a maintenance uniform, but the dress code hadn't changed her essential grace. "As long as Marcus stands with me." Mother and son moved to the podium together while Victoria gathered the crowd. Above them, sunlight streamed through the newly reinforced windows, catching the brass letters being installed over the entrance. Thomas Sterling Tower, building a safer tomorrow. The lobby fell quiet, ready to hear the story of a man who valued truth over power, safety over profit, and love over legacy. Ready to celebrate not just Thomas Sterling's life, but the future he'd dreamed of, a future his son would now help build, one ethical decision at a time. The law offices of Jensen and Associates occupied the entire 45th floor of a building that, ironically, Thomas Sterling had designed. 2 months after Richard's arrest, Marcus sat between Grace and Victoria as Eleanor Jensen, the Sterling family's original attorney, opened Thomas's restored will. "As the DNA tests have confirmed Marcus Johnson's paternity," Eleanor began, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes, "and with Richard Sterling's rights of inheritance legally forfeit due to his conviction, we can now execute Thomas Sterling's true final wishes." She lifted a document from her desk, the same will Grace had kept hidden all these years, now officially validated by the courts. Thomas Sterling's estate, including his shares in Sterling Properties and all associated holdings, passes to his son, Marcus Johnson Sterling. Marcus started at the use of his new legal name. Grace squeezed his hand. "Additionally, Eleanor," continued, "the educational trust Thomas established for his unborn child has grown considerably over 16 years. The current value stands at $12 million. Victoria smiled at Marcus's shocked expression. Thomas always did think ahead, but Eleanor wasn't finished. "There's more." Thomas left specific instructions for the creation of a foundation, the Thomas Sterling Institute for Sustainable Architecture. The mission statement is quite detailed. She passed Marcus a bound document, his father's vision laid out in precise paragraphs: scholarships for underprivileged students, research grants for sustainable building materials, funding for affordable housing, built to the highest safety standards. All Sterling Properties buildings will be required to meet these environmental and safety guidelines, Eleanor explained. It's legally binding, written into the company charter now. Richard must have hated that clause, Victoria mused. No wonder he buried the will. Marcus studied the document, recognizing his father's ideals in every line. "How do we start?" "We already have," Victoria replied. "The board approved the initial funding this morning, $500 million drawn from the recovered offshores. Accounts Richard had hidden," Grace gasped softly. Eleanor smiled and pulled out another document. "There's one more thing. Thomas left a letter of appointment, naming Grace Johnson as the foundation's first executive director. He cited her extraordinary business acumen and unwavering ethical compass." Grace's eyes filled with tears. He remembered. "All those nights we spent discussing business theory when I was just a housekeeper studying accounting texts after my shift." "You were never just anything, Mom," Marcus said softly. "Dad saw that. Now everyone else will too." Eleanor pressed a button on her desk intercom. "Send them in, please." The office doors opened to admit Howard Chen, Lisa Martinez, and Sarah Chen, each carrying folders thick with plans. "Your father believed in teamwork," Eleanor explained. "The foundation's board of directors is designed to include people from all levels of the company: engineers, security personnel, support staff, people who understand the real impact of corporate decisions." Howard spread architectural plans across the conference table. "The first project is ready for review: affordable housing units, built to Thomas's original safety specifications, with integrated childcare facilities. Solar panels on every roof," Lisa added. "Security systems that protect without intimidating. Common spaces designed for community building." Sarah opened her laptop, displaying a budget spreadsheet. The numbers work. Using Thomas's sustainable materials actually reduces long-term maintenance costs. We can build better and safer without sacrificing profitability. Marcus moved to the windows, looking out at the city his father had helped shape. Somewhere out there, Richard Sterling sat in a prison cell, still believing that power and profit were all that mattered. But here, in this room, Thomas Sterling's true legacy was finally taking form. "There's one more decision to make," Victoria said gently. "The company name, Sterling Properties, carries a lot of baggage now." Marcus turned back to the room, to his mother, standing tall and proud in her executive suit, to Victoria, who had risked everything to help expose the truth, to the team of dedicated professionals who had chosen ethics over easy profit. "Thomas Sterling Institute," he said firmly. "Not just the foundation, but the whole company. New name, new mission, same values Dad believed in." Eleanor made a note, smiling. "It's official then, though there is the small matter of your own name change to consider." Marcus looked at his mother. Grace nodded encouragement. "Marcus Thomas Sterling," he decided, "honoring both my parents, the one who gave me life and the one who taught me how to live it." Eleanor began preparing the paperwork, but Marcus was already moving to the plans on the conference table. "Show me the child care center designs." Again, Dad's notes mentioned natural lighting being crucial for child development. The team gathered around, voices mixing with the scratch of pencils and rustling of papers. Outside, the sun caught the windows of Thomas Sterling's buildings, their glass and steel reaching skyward like promises kept. In her pocket, Grace touched the old photograph of herself and Thomas, its edges worn soft with years of secret holding. But it wasn't a secret anymore. Their love, their son, their shared vision of what business could be, it was all stepping into the light at last. "Thank you," she whispered to Thomas's memory, "for believing in me, in us, in what was possible." And somewhere perhaps Thomas Sterling smiled, watching his son build the future he had dreamed of. One sustainable building, one protected family, one ethical decision at a time. 1 year later, Marcus stood in his father's old office on the 32nd floor, adjusting his tie in the reflection of the window. The same window where everything had ended for Thomas Sterling was now where everything began each morning for his son. The office remained largely unchanged. The architectural drawings still lined the walls. The old drafting table still stood in the corner, though now it shared space with modern design computers. The door opened and Grace entered, elegant in her executive suit. "Ready? The dedication ceremony starts in 10 minutes. Marcus nodded, picking up a framed photo from his desk, the one of Thomas and Grace in the garden, now displayed proudly rather than hidden away. Beside it sat a newer photo, Marcus, Grace, and Victoria, at the opening of the first Thomas Sterling Institute housing complex, their smiles bright with achievement. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Marcus said, following his mother to the elevator. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday we were standing up to Richard in the lobby." The elevator doors opened onto a transformed ground floor. Where there had once been cold marble and intimidating security barriers, now there was warm wood and welcoming open space. The Thomas Sterling Memorial Daycare Center occupied one wing, its windows looking out onto a children's garden. Sarah Chen, now the center's director, waved as she led a group of toddlers in a morning activity. The lobby's central feature was no longer a corporate logo, but a living wall of plants designed according to Thomas's original sustainable blueprints. Beside it, a bronze plaque told the true story of Thomas Sterling and his vision for ethical architecture. Victoria met them by the building's entrance, where a crowd had gathered. "The mayor's here," she reported, "along with the press, and you'll never guess who else showed up." She gestured to Frank Reeves, the former driver whose testimony had helped convict Richard. He stood with his family, his grandchildren playing, near the fountain that had replaced the old security desk. Lisa Martinez approached with final security reports. All buildings in the Thomas Sterling network now meet or exceed the new safety standards, she announced proudly. We're actually setting industry benchmarks. Howard Chen joined them, tablet in hand. The sustainable energy initiatives have cut operating costs by 30%. Other developers are asking to license our green technology. Marcus stepped to the podium as the crowd settled. Above him, the building's new name caught the morning light. Thomas Sterling Institute, building tomorrow's legacy today. 1 year ago, Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly through the space, we gathered here to expose a truth long buried. Today we gather to celebrate a different truth, one my father always believed in. That business can be both profitable and ethical. That buildings can be both beautiful and safe. That legacy isn't about power or money, but about the lives we touch and the future we build. He gestured to the children playing by the fountain. Every morning, I work in the office where my father died, trying to protect people he'd never meet. But I also work where he lived, where he dreamed, designed, and believed in something better. This building, once a symbol of corporate greed, now stands for everything he fought for. Grace and Victoria joined him at the podium as he continued. The Thomas Sterling Institute has completed 12 sustainable housing projects this year. Our scholarship program has sent 50 students to architecture school. Our research division is revolutionizing green building technology. But most importantly, we've proven that my father was right. Doing good is good business. The mayor stepped forward for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, but Marcus had one more thing to say. He looked up at the soaring structure above them, his father's masterpiece now fulfilled. In his final letter, my father wrote that truth has a way of rising to the light. Today, we're not just letting in the light, we're building with it. Powered by solar panels he designed, illuminating spaces. He dreamed of brightening futures he believed in. The ribbon fell away. Applause erupted, and through the lobby's vast windows, the morning sun streamed in, catching the brass letters of Thomas Sterling's name, throwing rainbow patterns across the gathered faces, all the lives touched by one man's unwavering belief in doing what was right. Grace slipped her hand into her son's, and together they stepped forward into the future Thomas had always envisioned, a future built not on fear and greed, but on courage, integrity, and the enduring power of truth finally set free.